Hey, Dr. Phil, back at you with today's real story. I like to start with some headlines so you know what we're talking about, but there are so many about this right now that I didn't really know how to choose. I'm talking about activist judges trying to take away the United States president's executive power to govern.
The real constitutional crisis is taking place within our judicial branch.
You have these activist judges trying to restrain what they see are the rightful and legitimate powers of the duly elected president.
They're seeking the most radical left-wing judges who are issuing nationwide injunctions that are an absolute abuse of power.
Now, I've talked to a lot of lawyers and a few judges to see how they feel about this, and a lot of them are very, very concerned. Some Democrat, some Republican appointees, very concerned that activist judges in America are putting politics over our nation's security and doing so in a way that could actually threaten our democratic process. Now, case in point, just this week, a federal judge blocked Trump from revoking legal status for more than 500,000 migrants. Big surprise, Judge Indira Talwani is an Obama appointee. This one you've seen, U.S. District Judge James Boasberg. He tried to stop President Trump from using the Alien Enemies Act to deport dangerous Venezuelan gang members. Boasberg stated there is no historical precedent for this kind of deportation when Congress has not declared war. Now, you can agree or disagree with that interpretation, but here are some problems. He made the ruling when prisoners were already aboard a military plane over international waters, undermining the ability of the President of the United States to conduct foreign affairs with foreign leaders. Now, what does that mean? The President of the United States had made a negotiation and reached an agreement with politicians in El Salvador and Venezuela about what was going to happen, and then a federal judge intercedes and says, no, he can't do that. What does that say internationally about our president's ability to conduct foreign policy? Now, most concerning, he's a judge in D.C., not in Texas, which has jurisdiction over the case. Think about that. A judge that doesn't have jurisdiction over the case, over 1,000 miles away, just issues a ruling. The lawyer for 5 of the Venezuelan gang members shopped the case to D.C. looking for an activist judge. Well, the Supreme Court tossed out Judge Boasberg's order.
High Court ruled that Trump can use the Alien Enemies Act to send Venezuelan gangbangers to a mega prison in El Salvador. This is a huge ruling in Trump's favor and a major win for the country.
They said the detainees are confined in Texas, so venue is improper in the District of Columbia. That means that judge has no power over this case. Jonathan Turley wrote a blog about this, a law professor, quote, that should have been Judge Boasberg's response when the challengers first came to his courtroom. I'm interjecting this, that he should have said, I have no jurisdiction here. Continuing on with the quote, Professor Turley said instead, he set off a series of irregular hearings, including holding an emergency hearing on a Saturday, despite not being the designated judge for such emergency matters that week. Attorney General Pam Bondi posted on X, tonight's decision, referring to the Supreme Court, is a landmark victory for the rule of law. An activist judge in Washington, D.C. does not have the jurisdiction to seize control of President Trump's authority to conduct foreign policy and keep the American people safe. White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt said that Boasberg's order, quote, had no lawful basis. Now, this raises a bigger question. Acting U.S. Solicitor General Sarah Harris told the Supreme Court that, quote, case presents fundamental questions about who decides how to conduct sensitive national security-related operations in this country. The president through Article 2 or the judiciary through restraining orders. Now, think about this. Boasberg is one of 677 permanent district judgeships. There are 94 U.S. district courts across the country. How many of those activist judges like Boasberg, who don't like President Trump, could just up and decide to start issuing restraining orders and just say, you can't do what you're doing? Consider the fact that nearly 6 out of 10 full-time federal district judges have now been appointed by Democratic presidents, according to the Brookings Institute. The appointments were nearly evenly divided at the start of Biden's presidency, but Biden changed that. Biden posted, quote, "The Senate has confirmed the 235th federal judge during my presidency, the largest number of confirmations in a term in nearly 50 years. Judges shape our lives. I'm proud of those who heeded the call to serve and of the legacy I'll leave with the men and women I've appointed." What kind of legacy is he talking about? Letting foreign gang members stay in America? Putting judicial roadblock after roadblock in front of the current president so he can't conduct foreign policy, so he can't conduct the office of the chief executive of the United States of America? And there are other examples. One of the most recent is U.S. District Judge William Alsop, nominated by President Bill Clinton, ordered the administration to immediately offer over 16,000 probationary employees their jobs back. The Supreme Court then blocked the lower court decision, allowing Trump's deficit-cutting plan to play itself out. Another one, the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Fourth Circuit issued an order on March 14, 2025, lifting a nationwide injunction on President Trump's executive order targeting diversity, equity, and inclusion. A judge had said, nope, you can't do that. The appellate court says, oh, yes, he can. One more. U.S. District Court of the District of Columbia, a Biden appointee, ordered the government to issue checks for nearly $2 billion in foreign aid over Trump's national security review. In other words, President Trump wants to make sure we're not funding terrorist groups like Hamas, for instance, but Judge Ali had a problem with that. Now, who's running foreign policy? Some judge in D.C. who, by the way, don't miss the fact that these are appointed judges. These are not people you elected. You elected President Trump. He got over 270 electoral votes. This judge was appointed by one person. You have no idea what he knows about foreign policy of anything. But he decides they're going to overrule and spend $2 billion, which could be going to this terrorist group, which is why President Trump said don't do it. Now, there are some terms that you might need to learn. You probably already know them with everything that's been written. Judicial overreach. A court or judicial body exceeds its legal authority or jurisdiction. That's what I'm saying happened with Boasberg. Judicial activism. That's when judges are making rulings based on their policy views rather than their honest interpretation of the current law. And here's a big one, venue shopping. Now this happens not just in this situation, but all the time. You get ready to file something, you strategically shop around and find a court, a jurisdiction, or a judge where the person bringing the lawsuit, the company, agency, person bringing the lawsuit believes they're more likely to get a favorable ruling. They shop it. They find judges who like these kind of cases, courts that just rule in favor of these kinds of cases. It happens all the time with plaintiffs. They find a place where juries give big verdicts, so they go file a case there. Venue shopping. Now think about it. We got 677 district judges. What if a third of these district judges said, you know what, I'm going to become an activist and start issuing orders to block the president's actions? That would be like 200 of these judges. They could create complete chaos and paralyze the president of the United States. It would totally undermine democracy. It could stop the will of the electorate that was expressed through the election of the president by a bunch of men and women that were just appointed. That's judicial overreach, where judges interpret laws. They don't create them. If they start issuing rulings that go beyond their role, it could totally destroy the balance of power. And if you've got partisan judges who are ideologically driven rather than being impartial and sticking with the law, you got all kinds of problems. Judges need to be judges. They need to let politicians be politicians. The American people elected a president. The president needs to have the right to be a president. If he wants to choose to use executive orders and that's within his purview, then that's what he can do. And if you don't like it, then go to Congress. They can pass laws. We can't be having confusion over laws and policies. The law is the law. Policies are policies. There can be huge diplomatic consequences if a president's foreign policy or national security decisions can be blocked by some judge up in Idaho or Oregon or Texas or Louisiana can just issue a restraining order and the president's just hamstrung. He can't do what he said he was going to do. The entire world stage can see the U.S. is unstable or unreliable. Terrorism and national security threats can flourish because of the president's inability to act decisively. This can embolden adversaries, including terrorists and hostile foreign states. Border security. I mean, if the president says, no, we're closing this down, and some judge sitting up in Wisconsin decides, no, I'm going to issue a restraining order, you can't do that, then it's chaos. People can start flooding the border again. You can't do that. A president was elected. You can't have some judge issuing a restraining order saying they can't do it. This is a very serious situation. I did get a kick out of this parody site Babylon Bee. The Trump administration agenda was stopped in its tracks this week after a federal judge appointed himself the new president of the United States. There's nothing we can do, said legal expert. He's a federal judge. He just appointed himself. I smiled for a minute, but seems like we're kind of headed that way. Look, there's separation of powers in the United States, 3 branches of government. You learned this in middle school: legislative, executive, and judicial. To ensure a separation of powers and a system of checks and balances, preventing any branch from becoming too powerful. And it protects citizens' rights. There's a current case right now when a judge oversteps. U.S. District Judge John Bates attempting to force the CDC, the Department of Health and Human Services, and the Food and Drug Administration to restore LGBTQ content on taxpayer-funded websites. You may like that or not. It doesn't matter. It would nullify Trump's executive order 14168, which said remove and restrict any of this content from being published on government-funded websites. Now, Tennessee Congressman Andy Ogles introduced articles of impeachment against this judge for high crimes and misdemeanors. Seems a bit of an overreaction to me. Don't think we need to be impeaching these judges. They just need to stay in their lanes because, like I said, if you get 100 of these activist judges issuing temporary restraining orders on the president, say, for example, seeking to dissolve the Department of Education, blocking the suspension of funding of non-compliant agencies, blocking his enforcement of immigration laws, you're going to be in a lot of trouble here. This has to stop. I don't know which sites you go to, which papers you read, but this requires critical thinking. And I don't think this is at random. If they don't have control of the presidency and they don't have congressional control, so they think, well, we'll just get some activist judges to start issuing orders telling the president he can't be the president. That's not a good plan. That's not a good idea. We need to let the president be president and have the judges go back to being judges of the law in their own jurisdiction about things that fall within the confines of their courtroom. And that is the real story. Wherever you're getting the real story, make sure you subscribe and follow. I'll see you tomorrow. When my sleep was off, it felt like I couldn't show up as my best self. That's why I'm so excited to share something that makes a real difference. Beam's Dream Powder. Beam is proudly founded in America and run by people who share our values, hard work and integrity, and delivering results. It's a science-backed, healthy nighttime blend packed with ingredients shown to improve sleep, so you can wake up refreshed and ready to take on the day. Dream is made with a powerful blend of all natural ingredients: reishi, magnesium, L-theanine, apigenin, and melatonin. Beam has already improved over 17.5 million nights of sleep, helping people across the country wake up and feel their best. Here's the deal. Beam is giving my listeners the ultimate Patriot discount of 40% off. Try their best-selling Dream Powder and get up to 40% off for a limited time. Go to shopbeam.com/Dr. Phil and use code Dr. Phil at checkout. That's shopbeam.com/Dr. Phil and use code Dr. Phil for up to 40% off. Support an American company, invest in yourself, and start getting your best sleep tonight.